do that. There you go. Welcome back in some cases to BABS 46th Harmony College Online. I'm Mike Taylor. I'm the BABS Harmony College Education Manager. We've had some really great sessions so far this week, and plenty more still to come. We're running 2 sessions a night, as you know, 7:30 and 8:30. So still keep coming back if you can on tomorrow and on Friday. Just housekeeping wise, please could you stay on mute during the sessions, and if you have things you want to say or ask questions, please use the chat function. I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll try and deal with any questions, time permitting, at the end. So Wednesday night is music night. Later on, we have David Wright joining us, but we're going to kick off our session with Boo de Bruin. Boo is the current category director for BABS Musicality, but you probably also know that she sings tenor with the European champion quartet from 22, Avalon. She also sings with Amersham A Cappella in LABBS, and she's the assistant musical director there. She was also a brilliant contributor to the LABBS as the youth coordinator for 4 years. That was a fantastic role she played. And tonight she's going to be sharing thoughts about how to choose music, how to make your chorus shine through the music you choose. So I'm going to hand over to Boo, whose picture's disappeared just at the moment, but I'm hoping she's going to, there she's going to start screen sharing and take over the spiel from now on.
Fabulous. Can you hear me okay?
Hear fine.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much to everyone who saw my little note in the chat. I'm just going to leave this up for a second in case you didn't. It will be really useful for me to know who I'm kind of aiming this session at. So who are we in terms of, are we musical directors? Are we quartet singers? Are we just people who want to know a little bit more about this? And what kind of issues have you had in picking repertoire? So I'll just leave sort of 30 seconds. The link and the QR code both go to the same place. And if you can get that filled in while I'm just getting through the first little bit, then we can tailor the session accordingly.
I feel like we should have had like some lift music or something going on.
Sorry, if I should have been better prepared.
Like, yeah.
Oh well. Okay. Well, hopefully everyone, even if you haven't pressed submit, hopefully you've had an opportunity to sort of get that queued up on your phone or whatever, so you can be answering that. So Mike has already done a lovely introduction for me. So if you haven't met me before, hi, my name is Boo, and Mike has told you all about me. So I'm sort of approaching this as a chorus singer and a quartet singer and a director for many years, although I'm not currently, but I am an AMD, and also as the category director for musicality in BABS. I liked singing far too much myself to train as a judge in the ladies' organisation, so I trained with BABS instead. So we've got some directors in the house tonight. We've got quite a lot of quartet singers, some music team members, about 10 of us who are just singers in choruses. So quite a broad range of people. And we've had people talking about balanced repertoires, finding the right level, some emotional, moral stuff, things that everybody likes, things being really expensive. That's a useful one because we've got some bits about that. Where to look, legal aspects, sourcing things. Yeah, good stuff. So lots of things that I've covered in here. So this is hopefully going to go well. Okay, so starting off, thinking a little bit about what it means to have a balanced repertoire and why do we care, and how are we going to do this. So we want to be able to entertain lots of different audiences. And that might mean different set lists for different occasions, because sometimes repertoire is more or less appropriate. And it also might mean being able to entertain the same audience more than once. So like I know with my chamber choir, we do a lot of different sing-outs in the same area. And we're really fortunate that we have got some fans, for want of a better word, who will sort of follow us around because they know that we're going to sing different things in different places. And so it's entertaining for them to come more than once in a year. But it's not just about the people coming to watch us sing. We also want to keep the membership happy. So we want some variety within a rehearsal evening and variety within a gig. So to start out with, I would start with your repertoire with a very simple division of splitting things up by tempo and splitting things up by contestable barbershop and not contestable barbershop. So just in case you weren't quite sure what I meant, I've given you some examples, and these are hopefully songs that are pretty familiar to all of us. So there's a few lovely contest arrangements of Once Upon a Time. Rob Campbell's one is sung a lot in Babs. June Dale's one is sung more in Sweet Adeline's. Paper Moon as a sort of an easy beat, something you can kind of click along to, but it's not an up tempo. You're not going to have a 90 miles an hour choreo package to that. And then up tempos, things more like South Rampart Street. And those are all things that we do see on the contest stage. And then non-contestable stuff is stuff that we still might recognise as barbershop. Lots of BAB groups sing the June Dale version of Can You Feel the Love Tonight? But they're not things that we would expect to necessarily see in contest. So why are we trying to include both of those? Well, most BABs and quartets and choruses are going to have some music in their repertoire that wouldn't be appropriate for contest. And part of that is because a lot of our recommendations or requests come from members where they're asking us for a particular song rather than a particular arrangement. So it tends to be maybe a song they've heard on a radio. And since a lot of modern music is not really conducive harmonically to the barbershop style of arranging, that tends to mean that our singers in choruses especially are often requesting music that we wouldn't find on the contest stage. And even if we have an awareness of the breadth of contestable music and some of the amazing chords and things we can hear there, our audiences, apart from the BABS contest audience, often aren't familiar with that music. So we might be making a conscious decision to sing some non-barbershop arrangements because we think the audiences will most like things that they're familiar with. Now, that may or may not be true. Some of my best responses from audiences have been songs that they couldn't possibly have heard before, but it's a fair point. We might also be trying to increase the breadth of our repertoire. Barbershop is an arranging style rather than a genre, so you can arrange pretty much anything in barbershop style if you try hard enough, but there is certain music it works well for and certain music it doesn't. We definitely don't see soloists or six-part texture on the contest stage, but it can be really fun to experiment with these things and give us a bit more variety in the music that we're tackling. But at the end of the day, we are barbershop ensembles. And so it's a real shame if out of a repertoire of maybe 15 songs, which seems to be the average based on what people have said, we've only got a couple of barbershop numbers. Most of our groups are going to attend convention, at least semi-regularly, and we want music that can be sung there and score quite highly. And at the end of the day, we sing barbershop for a reason. We do it for the ring and we do it for the harmony, and you're much less likely to get those in other styles of music. As someone who sings a lot of things in a lot of different genres, barbershop isn't necessarily the easiest thing to get started with. But if you're at a medium level of sort of skill and proficiency, then it's easier to sing it well because the structure makes it easier to tune. So I think it's definitely worth having a good chunk of solid barbershop in our repertoire just because we sing it really well. And also, as barbershoppers, we're really quite spoilt. We're used to being able to get high quality, off-the-shelf learning tracks, and it's much harder to come by these for non-barbershop. You obviously always got the option of making your own, but for other kinds of other songs that aren't by barbershop arrangers, it might be a bit harder. I will do a little shout out just because a few people have mentioned costs of things, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about more traditional choral music, men's voice choir arrangements, that kind of thing. There's a really handy website called John Fletcher Music, which is it's basically one guy's pet project of making MIDI learning tracks. And anything that is out of copyright, you can basically access for free. And then if it's something that is still in copyright, then you can buy a subscription for 90 pence per member if you're buying for a whole course. It's a little bit more expensive if you're individuals, but 90 pence per member for 4 months access. And it's not as good as a vocal track, but it does open up a whole range of other repertoire that otherwise you might not be able to get learning tracks for. So that's a useful thing to sort of be aware exists. Now, I would say that barbershop choruses, we sing contest music well, and that's partly because we put a lot of work into it, but it's also because learning and singing homorhythm is just easier to do accurately and tunefully and resonantly. And also, we're really lucky that within the barbershop community, we've got this massive list of really accomplished arrangers who know a lot about voice leading and embellishment and how to make something more interesting than just the melody is. Although I will shout out that there are a few really, really wonderful non-barbershop arrangers who I would also trust with those things. So Deek Sharon did some wonderful stuff with the BHS. He and David Wright have an arrangement of Change the World together, but he's done lots and lots of a cappella stuff and written books about it and things. Kirby Shaw and Matt Huff as well. So they are sort of, I would say, my three top non-barbershop arrangers who really know their stuff. But basically, I tend to err on the side of picking non-contest arrangements that are still by barbershop arrangers because they're pretty good at what they do and they know how to make us sound good. So once we've started our repertoire with some contest music and some non-contest music, and we've got a bit of variety in terms of tempo to keep our audience happy, we possibly want to start thinking about some other considerations and other niches for which we might want a song. So first one, it can be good to explicitly think about how you feel about shared repertoire with other groups. So as organisations affiliated with BHS, we have these polecats that are very simple and straightforward and easy. Obviously, LABBS have a slightly different approach where they have music that's shared within the organisation that is not as traditional and not as straightforward. So it's worth having a bit of a think about how much time you're willing to dedicate to the polecats, because actually they are quite a nice way of filling out your repertoire, giving you some really easy stuff to kind of give you a vocal rest in between your big numbers. And some of them are really quite beautiful. But obviously, if you're going to sing them out, you want them to sound good. So I know my chorus, Amersham A Cappella, we try to have at least a passing knowledge of all the LABBS polecats, but we really love Bohemian Rhapsody. And that is a proper part of our repertoire. We sing it at shows and things. So we put a good chunk of time into rehearsing that, and we make it explicit to the members that that is not just a polecat, it is part of our repertoire, and we rehearse it as if it is. Another thing, do you share concerts with other BABS groups? Because if you do, it might be nice to have some songs to sing together. And if you don't, does it matter whether your repertoire overlaps? I'm really consistently amused at various people in groups I sing with who feel that they can't sing music that another really good chorus sings or another really good quartet sings because they want that music to be something that they can take ownership of. And while I really sympathise with that view, I think a lot of the time, the only time that we share a stage with these other groups is at convention. And so if another chorus or another quartet is singing a really great song, then I am absolutely in favour of magpieing ideas from them. Now, I mentioned about the polecats being quite straightforward. When we're thinking about difficulty, I mean that both from a vocal point of view and also a mental point of view. So it's really important that in our repertoire, we have some stuff that we can learn a bit easily and give ourselves some quick wins, some things that are going to please audiences, some things that are going to make us feel good about ourselves. And then also, from a vocal point of view, if you're routinely singing gigs as a single act or where you're taking up one half of a show, then you really need some easy stuff to put in between your big hard numbers, because as impressive as they are, they're only going to be impressive if you can sing them well. So, you know, Avalon, my quartet, we sing a number of the polecats and some other easy arrangements. We've got an arrangement of Beauty and the Beast, which is sort of polecat easy. We've got an arrangement of Dancing Queen by ABBA, which is very, very straightforward. And we intentionally put those between our contest stuff when we sing gigs, because it allows us to have a bit of a relax. So it's worth considering difficulty as you're picking your repertoire as well. Oh, I'm not sure why that decided to go backwards. Now, quite a few people have said that they're worried about how to get hold of arrangements, where they can get them from, and cost and that sort of thing. So I would say this is massively changed in well, within the time I've been in Barbershop. So when I first joined Barbershop, it was very much a case of you could buy things through the BHS and you would pay £50 or £100 as a one-off fee plus your per copy fee. It was very expensive. And then that kind of went by the by because people realized it wasn't very legal. And then it became a case of clearing things individually with publishing houses, and that was really time consuming. But no more. So there are two websites, Sheet Music Plus and Sheet Music Direct, and they both come under the Hal Leonard Arrange Me program. So anything that Hal Leonard owned copyright for, which is millions of songs, it's now possible for arrangers to arrange for free, and then put up there, and then you can buy them for something like £3 a copy. And loads and loads of these excellent arrangers that we know and love have a massive catalogue up there. So I'm sure we all know David Wright, Tom Gentry, Kevin Keller, they've been around for years. Adam Scott, you might be less familiar with. He's a musicality judge in the BHS, and he arranges as his full-time day job for other choral organisations. He's got a massive catalogue. Melody Hine, very exciting young arranger and BHS musicality judge. Erin Dale, we all know. Liz Garnett, national treasure of Great Britain. Carol Prieto, you might be less familiar with because she doesn't really do contest music, but she's very, very good at barber pop. So sort of those things that still have our melody inside the music and are largely homorhythmic, but that you probably wouldn't see on a contest stage. Steve Tramack is the current category director for the musicality category. And this is like a tiny snippet of his arranging catalogue. Adam Bock sings with Gotham and used to sing with Ambassadors, was kind of mentored by David Wright. He's got some beautiful arrangements up there. Steve Armstrong from Toronto Northern Lights. Of course, Sam Hubbard, as known and loved by us all. Scott Kitts-Miller, who's arranged some really nice stuff for Instant Classic and GQ. And Rob Campbell, that's a tiny selection of his arrangements. But the point is, these are all arrangers who have hundreds of things that you can get for a couple of pounds a copy. And they all specify how easy or hard they think they are, which they're usually very good at. A lot of these arrangers are very good at stating ranges for things. So like Liz Garnett always tells you, oh, this is going to go from a C3 to an E4 or whatever, so that you can look at the ranges for your particular group. And basically, I tend not to really buy things from anywhere else anymore, unless it's something that I can download from CPDL. The Barbershop Harmony Society is also on Sheet Music Plus, so a lot of the things that they publish are on there. It's not everything, because Hal Leonard will only put things in this program if they have international copyright. So some things that are only available in the States haven't been put on here, but there's still several hundred things there. You can buy music directly from the BHS, but in some instances, you then have to source print licenses to make it legal to sing in the UK. Janice Bain, who works for the BHS, is very, very good at helping with that. She's kind of the Mike Lofthouse of BHS. Mike Lofthouse can also help you source print licenses for that, but it's just a little bit more complicated. In a similar vein, Sweet Adelines do also have a fairly extensive library, and that might sound like a strange place for me to be suggesting you look, bearing in mind that BABS is historically a male organisation, and even now only has treble groups in our juniors and seniors competitions. But realistically, the vast majority of music written for treble voices can be revoiced and sung by lower voices with very little difficulty. So if you've got somebody in the chorus who can use some free notation software like MuseScore to write something out and then transpose it, it opens up a lot of other repertoire for you. So I do also think it's worth you thinking about, what is our one particular song for this one particular event? If we were asked to sing at this thing, what would we sing? So I'm fairly sure that most choruses and quartets have got a love song somewhere in their repertoire, but do you also have something that's sort of a bit of a feel-good celebration, like Walking on Sunshine, or Is This the Way to Amarillo? Just something that's a real party vibe. I also hate to say it, but do you have something that is appropriate for a funeral? So maybe Songbird. Linda Corcoran has got a really lovely arrangement of that, and it has Tim tracks to go with it. Or I'll Be Seeing You, or Fields of Gold. Deke Sharon has a really nice arrangement of Fields of Gold that a few people in BABS sing. I think it's also worth making sure you have something that's recognisably from the charts, even if that's from the charts in the 80s and 90s. It doesn't need to be super modern music from last year, but it's good if you've got something that you can sing in a pub or sing at a street party, all that kind of thing. And then my next suggestion is having a look at some Disney songs and musicals, which I think a lot of our LABBS groups are very up on, but BABS groups maybe less so. So I'd say Disney songs and musicals undoubtedly go down well with younger audiences, but also they are one of the few sources of brand new music that maybe other groups aren't singing yet or audiences haven't heard yet, that is harmonically rich enough to support good barbershop arranging. So in the Bruin household, we have a rule that whenever we hear a song on the radio that has circle of fifths movement and is good for barbershop, we immediately call dibs on which of us is going to arrange it, because it only happens about once a year. But there are lots of musicals and Disney movies that have songs with really nice poetic lyrics, really memorable melodies, really good harmony. And so it can be a good source of new music that is either potentially familiar to audiences if you're going down the Disney route, or even not so familiar, but that can support some good harmony and good voice leading that will show your ensemble off to its best. So these are just some ideas if you hadn't thought this before. The 5 titles at the back are published directly by BHS and are all available on their website. The 5 titles at the front are all ones from Sheet Music Plus. So Adam Bock, I think Climb Every Mountain was for Class Ring. Tom Gentry did Aquarius from Hair. James Whittick, another great British arranger, meantime competed with and won with Be the Hero from Big Fish the Musical, if you were at BABS this year. Steve Tremack has done For Good from Wicked, and then David Wright's Magic to Do from Pippin. And that's just a small selection of things that are often quite familiar to audiences, but that you might maybe not have thought of straight away. Now, if you're trying to really, really diversify, then as well as some things that are barbershop but not for contest, you might want some things that are definitively not barbershop. So I'm thinking like Westminster Sing Shenandoah, which is basically tenor melody throughout, or The Bridge Over Troubled Water with a quartet in it, or things like Vocal Spectrum's American in Paris, that is just very, very clearly not barbershop. But at the same time, we don't want to go completely off the deep end. So where are some of the areas that we might look for some additional repertoire? So one thing we might think about is some spirituals and folk songs and things. So just about everybody ever has arranged Shenandoah. Likewise, Amazing Grace. There's some really nice arrangements of Danny Boy, Scarborough Fair. This one of She Moved Through the Fair is not by a barbershop arranger at all. This one you can get from Sheet Music Plus as well. And it's a really, really lovely arrangement for a men's voice one. And another big advantage of these songs, apart from them being well known and well loved without being pop songs, is that they're almost always public domain songs. And so that means that even if you're buying them from an American arranger, you might still have to pay that American arranger, but you're not going to have to deal with print licenses at our end. So quite often what happens with arrangements of pop songs and things is someone like David Harrington will say to you, this is fine, this is public domain, you can sing it. And it's public domain in the US, but not in the UK. So then you have to find who owns the copyright and pay it. Whereas with spirituals and folk songs, you don't have to do that. And lots of people know them. So you've got that familiarity without necessarily having to go into pop songs that maybe don't support our ensemble so well, or that make our basses really sad because they would like to have some words once in a while, all that kind of thing. Now, if you're really trying to diversify even further, you might want to look slightly further afield into the world of choral music. Now, I would say this is probably the biggest challenge if you do want to go down this way, because I think a number of us don't realise the degree to which barbershop harmony makes it easy for us both to memorise and to sing, because triads and dominant sevenths are comparatively easy to tune. If you can hear those overtones, it helps you to know where you are. So if your ensemble tends to go a bit approximato in your tuning, then I would approach these with caution. But there are some absolute choral bangers out there. So the 3 on the left are all ones that are available totally for free from CPDL, which I think is the Choral Public Domain Library, and IMSLP. So you can download them completely for free. And they're arranged sort of within our ranges. I know you can see that Hodie Christus Natus Est is arranged with alto in there, and it is 5 parts, but that alto is really our barbershop tenor range. So it fits quite nicely. And it's a really nice way of adding a bit of diversity to the rep. And I've just put that link in there for John Fletcher Music again, who has learning tracks for some of these. If you do find yourself wanting to get into choral music, it can feel a bit intimidating if you don't have someone in the chorus who is already singing that kind of music. But a lot of our big famous barbershop choruses do some things. This 08 basically did a whole album of classical stuff. They've done a couple of pieces by the Norwegian composer Ola Yelio. He's published this Ubi Caritas for all the voicings. So I've sung it for SATB and it's absolutely beautiful. But they do that, and they do his Northern Lights and another one. Ambassadors do a reduction of That Ever I Saw by Dharma Mida. I think it's originally more than 4 parts. And I think Mailvox have now picked this up as well. I think that was one of the ones, if you've seen, they've recently won a big competition, and that was one of the ones that they sang with that. So there are some nice options out there for adding something very, very different to your repertoire. And I think it can be really interesting to show audiences the breadth of things that we can sing, because actually we do have a really impressive skill range as barbershoppers, and it can be fun to show them something that's a little bit completely different. Now, one more option that is available to you if you're wanting to diversify your repertoire, particularly if there is a song that you are desperate to sing, is to commission a custom arrangement. And I talk to quite a lot of people who have no idea how to go about this and no idea what it would cost, and they're a bit worried about approaching people and then finding out they can't afford it. So in terms of both the budget and the timing, it can be extremely variable. So depending on whether you're talking to a fresh-faced young arranger who just wants to get people singing their music, or one of the big stars like David Wright or Kevin Keller or Brent Graham, you could be looking at up to several £100s. And likewise, those big name arrangers are much more likely to have a particularly extensive queue to work through before they get to you. So I'm not sure how much Amersham paid for our most recent arrangement, but I know that a previous one cost us £600. And our most recent one, we had to wait a full year to get. Equally, I know another arranger who happened to be staying in our spare room while he was here coaching, and sort of told us that he needed to write an arrangement for a British group that week, and did. So there is a fair bit of variability. What I would say is that all of these barbershop arrangers, we think of them as kind of celebrities and a bit big and scary, but actually they're all lovely people who are very excited to have people singing their arrangements. So the easiest way to get someone to arrange for you is just send them a nice email and say, would you be prepared? And I don't know any arrangers who won't just reply and say, this is my rate, this is my time scale, would you be interested? And they are very used to, particularly where they've been working with high scoring groups, with those groups sort of sending the same song to 4 different people and saying, do you have an idea for this or not? Now, if you've got a less experienced arranger, they might just ask you for the name of the song and then see whether they can have a go at it. But a more experienced arranger is probably going to ask you for a few additional questions. So it's worth having in mind before you're contacting people, why do you like this song? Is it that you're really grabbed by the lyrics and you think they're really meaningful or really memorable or really funny? Is it that your lead absolutely loves singing this melody and so you want something that's particularly going to feature them? Is it that it's really toe-tapping rhythm and you can just imagine the chorus getting up and dancing? Because if you can provide your arranger with that information, it's going to help them to give you an arrangement that is actually going to serve you best as a chorus. So if you have a vision for the song, it's worth letting them know that. You're also very likely to be asked for what both the extreme pitches and the usable pitches of your sections or your singers are. So what I mean by that is I sing barbershop tenor, I also sing soprano in choral things, and I've comfortably got a top C. But on contest stage, or just on stage in general, Avalon never sing with me above an A, because I can sing that note, I think nicely, but in a barbershop context, it doesn't sound right. Likewise, Sophie, my bass, she's got a lovely bottom D. She can sing a D flat, and we do use it in repertoire songs, but she's not comfortable doing it for contest things. So for contest things, we sort of go, okay, the range is from her on the bottom D to me on the top A, and although we can sing notes beyond that, we won't. Or like we know, Karen has a phenomenal belt on that sort of D, E flat at the top of the stave. So that's really useful intel for an arranger. If you're a quartet and you're kind of going, I don't know how to find those ranges, I would just sing some scales. And particularly if you can sing scales in a kind of, this is probably going to be horrible because I haven't got my mic set to music, but a sort of meh, 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 where you're putting quite a bit of weight behind it and putting it in your nose. It's a good kind of way of stressing your voice nicely so you can see where your best bits are. And that's useful intel. Likewise, good posting notes. I know Steve Tramack did some arrangements for After Hours that were there's Nothing's Gonna Harm You that has got an interesting key change in it because it's specifically to get them into the right key for the lead to post on his favorite note to post on. Also, if you do know particular chord inversions that you ring well. So for instance, Amersham really love an icicle seventh. They ring that really well. So when we ask David Wright to arrange for us, we say, give us as many of those as you can fit in appropriately because we're good at them. And then any other sort of strengths and weaknesses of the ensemble. So if your basses have a really strong internal sense of rhythm, then for a rhythm song, maybe you can cope with something where they have the steady 4/4 while the other stuff is going on top of them. Whereas if they're more prone to wandering, you might need to keep a more homorhythmic texture. Now, the big money question, contestability. So everything I'm going to say in this next little bit, I'm saying through the lens of BHS judging. So that's both BABS and LABBS. It's not true for Sweet Adelines because they have much more conservative rules when it comes to musicality. And I am not fully fluent in those. You have to be behind a paywall to get to their category description. So I've never actually read it, but I do know that there are chords that they still won't use, and just generally they are far more conservative than we are. So firstly, you might have heard that we are moving away from calling things black and white, contestable or non-contestable, and we're sort of moving more towards saying this is a better or worse vehicle for contest. There are comparatively few things that are actually a hard no, but there's obviously still a bit of variation in terms of which arrangements will score better or worse. So the general rule is talk to the musicality category. I tend to get, I would say, an email every 2 weeks, maybe more nearer to music picking time, asking, can we sing this in contest? And if you send me an email like that, I will email it to the whole category and aim to get back to you within 2 weeks to tell you our thoughts about that. And I would suggest you probably do that if you're uncertain, even if someone else has told you that it might be okay. It's also worth pointing out that if you're concerned about matters of taste, then that's down to the performance category to adjudicate. And so they can tell you a bit more about that. One thing that is potentially quite useful for you, if you're unsure about the history of a song, Sweet Adelines have been doing a big piece of work where people look into the history of songs, and basically they do have a banned list of songs that they no longer feel it's appropriate to sing, maybe for reasons of race or sex or whatever the issue is. So in BHS contests, we don't have that. But I do still think it's a useful resource to be aware of, because I know there are some songs that I wasn't aware of the context singing them. So maybe they were songs that originally came from a minstrel show and they've had lyrics changed. So now they sound fine to sing. But if somebody has that context, it might be problematic for them. None of us intentionally want to offend anybody. And it's a lot easier to rule songs out before you've dedicated time and energy and money to learning them, rather than to remove them from the repertoire afterwards. So that document there is quite a useful list to look through. I think we're going to send out slides afterwards, so I can give you the link to that one. But also, as I say, talk to the performance category. So in terms of contestability in BABS contests, there are relatively few hard and fast rules, but these are they. So the first one is no instrumental accompaniment, and that does also apply to the setup and the transition between songs and the non-singing time. So we've had a number of inquiries over the years about whether it's okay to take pitch from a train whistle if you were doing a song about traveling on the train, to which I would say yes. And also whether it's okay to introduce a song with an instrumental solo, to which I'd say no, because even though it's not actually accompanying, we're still not in favour of that. So then our second one is that we need to have 4 distinct voices, 4 distinct parts. One thing I would say with this is that we, as musicality judges, we adjudicate with this in terms of intent rather than execution. So I remember we had a situation a few years ago with a chorus where there was clearly a bass who couldn't hold his part, and he was singing the lead part an octave down instead of the bass part. So we had 5 parts of the whole song. Now that obviously did impact our score in terms of it wasn't going to ring nearly as well because we had random extra notes in there, but it didn't attract a penalty because it clearly wasn't the intention that the chorus had decided to add a 5th part. It was just that someone had got lost. But if you were doing something, I'm sure a lot of people have seen there was one of the BHS groups in the summer came a cropper because they'd had a texture with sort of soloists, and the soloists were hanging on while the chorus was coming back in, and so that was adjudicated quite strongly. So definitely 4 distinct parts. All parts singing words, so we're okay with a little bit of scat singing maybe for the sake of an interlude that's sort of a brief moment within the arrangement. Or lots of arrangements now start with a sort of instrumental introduction where you've maybe got loo 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 for 4 bars. That's fine. But if we're talking about something that is a feature of the arrangement as a whole, and it's kind of one of the defining things that you would remember about that arrangement, at that point, we've got some difficulty. And then, of course, melody in an inside voice. And I'm sure most of you know this, but we often get a bit of confusion about can the baritone sing the melody? So if your baritone takes the tune for a verse, from a musical point of view, it's fine. From a performance or a delivery point of view, we might have questions about what that means is going on emotionally in the song. You know, if you're singing a love song to the one person you're in love with, and then suddenly the baritone has the tune instead of the lead, that might be a bit emotionally confusing, but musically, not a problem. But we don't expect to see extended tenor melody, bass melody, bits in context. So there is a bit of a question, well, how much is too much? And it's a challenging question to answer because we don't have scores. It's not like a music festival where we sit there counting bars. So it kind of comes down to at what point does it become one of the main things of the song rather than just a little snippet. And that's kind of judged on a case-by-case basis. And the better you sing it, the longer you can probably get away with it for. But at the point at which we're getting to a whole verse of melody in an outside melody in an outside voice, or getting close to half the song without words, at that point we're getting into difficulties. Now, in terms of chord progressions, lots of you will remember the days when we used to count chords and specifically look for the magical 2-7-5-7-1. We really have moved away from that. So the musicality category now regards itself as sort of advocates for great musicality in the barbershop style rather than the keepers of the keys and trying to keep people out of things. So just a few places you might have a little look for some ideas of whether you could sing something in contest before you ask us. Worth looking at previous year's score sheets to see what everyone else has been trying. Do bear in mind that every contest is scored by a different panel of judges. You can look at the Barbershop Scores database for what has scored lower in musicality in the past, but it is worth bearing in mind that rules have changed in the last few years. So like if you look up Blue Skies, you can see that a few years ago, we did used to consider that not suitable for contest, whereas now it would be much more so. A lot of our teach track makers do provide information about what they consider contestable and not, like maybe because they know because something's been commissioned for contest. So it's worth using that as a little place to look. Kim and Cole are both particularly good at saying, I've been asked to do this for contest before. And then the last little bit, I'm running very close to time here, sorry, it's just a practicality about how do you go about picking music. So I think it's really important that you think about where music is going to fit into the repertoire. However much you love it, there needs to be a niche that it fills. You can't have an entire repertoire of heart-rending ballads, even if you sing them really well, because your audience are just going to get a bit bored. I think if you're a chorus, then the director needs to love every song because they're going to be crafting vision and rehearsing the nitty-gritty, and that's really hard to do if they feel lukewarm about it. But I do think that depending on the size of your music team, it's a good idea to give your music team members a veto if they feel a song is inappropriate, or to maybe give them a shortlist and ask for their help working from that. Although that then does put the onus on the director to find all the songs. For a quartet, I think it's great if we can take a bit more ownership of it. So when Avalon pick music, we start from a long list. I make the long list because I'm the music geek. And basically what we do is a bit like we've talked about, we look at what sort of tempo it is it for contest? Also, practically speaking, where would we get it? You can see those are all from Sheet Music Plus. This is just one snippet of the spreadsheet, but as I said, it's a great place to find music. And then we just do, you can see on the right-hand side, we do a little bit of a sort of ranking of how do you feel about this? And we do it completely numerically. We do also give all of us a -10. So if any of us hates a song or strongly feels we don't want to sing it, we don't have to justify it. We just say, I'm not singing that one. There is so much good music out there. You really don't need to sing anything that anyone has a strong dislike of. So with only 3 minutes left, which I can only apologise, that's about it.
Thanks very much, Bruin. We've got just a couple of questions came into the chat there. I think just a clarification about from Demelza, like a do is allowed shortly. Is a little solo, for example, a lead instead of all of them allowed?
So it is, as long as your leads are then going to sing a different part. So we can only ever have 4 parts at the same time. So if you're going to have a lead singing a solo, everybody else needs to be either singing on silent and miming, which is one way of doing it if your lead section are not very good at singing baritone parts, for instance, or they need to be split between the other sections. You can't have a 5th part, and you can't have the lead singing their part, the soloist singing their part, and the other leads neutral voweling behind it, because we've heard people try to do that before, where they're sort of singing the same notes, but some on ooh and the soloist on the words. That's also a 5th distinct part, so we wouldn't do that.
And it is okay, but Boo, correct me if I'm wrong, to have the small quartet come out from the chorus, and just again sticking to the 4-part rule. But
exactly, so you can have your quartet singing as long as the chorus aren't singing at the same time, and we just got to be really careful that we don't have those overlaps of, you can't have the chorus holding the chord and the quartet coming in on top of them.
Thank you. There's another sort of a comment from JD. I think a song which not naturally Barbershop has been forced into Barbershop, but doesn't sound like the original.
Shoehorning.
In the top 10 last year, a song that was heavily Barbershopped and sung well, but wasn't reflective of the original.
So our category nutshell says that we judge the song and arrangement as performed. So it kind of comes down to how awkward does it feel to us. So there's always that awkward thing where the judges might not know the original song, but we have definitely had many discussions about songs, some of which have scored very highly because they're being sung very well, but where we would still go, oh, actually, musically, that did not do it for me, because, as you say, it sounded unnatural, like often where people have tried to force that 2/7 in the past. Yeah, we would rather you didn't.
Super. Any more questions from anybody? Lots of thanks coming up in the chat now, which is great.
Oh, that's nice. Sorry, that was a bit of a whirlwind. Apparently, I talk more when I'm excited.
Speaking for everybody, I think it was really informative and great to have that sort of detailed think through that everybody has to go through in a quartet or chorus. Whoever's doing it, you have to have that thought process, otherwise you stumble into an imbalanced repertoire. How do we end up like this? So really, really good. I did have a question, but we probably don't have time for it, Boo. So you and I will have to chat about it later. It's sort of like,
sure.
What is it that makes songs easy or hard to sing? You know, that's the sort of how do you pick up a piece of music? You know, how do I know this is going to be hard if I'm just looking at the music?
Oh, did you know, Mike, that for last Harmony College, I did an entire session about what makes music easy or hard to learn. We'll have to bring it back.
Send me a link. That'll be brilliant. Yes, that's super. I missed that, and I'll have to find it. And that's exactly a question I'd love to know the answer to. Super. That being it, yes, Melanie says send us a link to that too. Actually, you did talk about sending out the slides. We haven't quite worked out how we're going to do that. We're probably going to load it onto the website somewhere. So it's a watch this space. We probably aren't going to send it out to everybody in their emails because we can't track who's actually joined this call, but it's lovely to see all 50 some of you joining us. So just remains to thank Boo tremendously for a super session, and really enjoyable, and I see people applauding and I can hear them in the background, excellent stuff, Boo. Many thanks for giving up your time to deliver that tonight. And what we do now, for if you've not been with us, is we put everybody into the waiting room in the hope that they'll go and make a cup of tea and then come back in 10 minutes or so for the next session. So I'll suggest, Alistair, you start doing that, and we'll work our way into the warm